Hey, how are you guys doing today? My name is Yassine Presentation, and I'm going to be doing my research presentation on family influences on offending behaviors. Now, to start things off, this topic has been researched for a very long time, and it has a lot of backbone. One of the most detailed research papers on this topic comes by way of Terry Moffett back in 1993, and it is practically the core of my research paper. New research on this topic is coming out every year, and it all seems to heavily rely on Moffat's research. Now, after hours of research in this complex topic, a majority of the studies that I've come across all seem to heavily indicate that family influences do play a large role on an individual's risk for offending. A multitude of factors come into play here, and in this presentation, I want to lay out how exactly family can influence offending trajectories. Now, regardless of what the research on family influences on offending trajectories conclude, I think we can all agree that it is an incredibly important topic and can tremendously help researchers have an idea of how much of a role family has on an individual. Research on this topic should be supported by everybody, and its complexity should only indicate how important it is. Now, without further ado, let's get into what the literature has to say on this topic. Now, one of the earliest pieces of literature on this topic, as priorly mentioned, comes from Moffat and his developmental theory of crime. This theory primarily highlights two offender types: life course persistent offenders and adolescence limited offenders. Life course persistent offenders, as their title suggests, persist in their criminal behavior past their adolescent years, which is when adolescence-limited offenders see a heavy decline in offending behaviors. Before getting into Moffat's research study, he theorizes that this disparity between the two groups could be a result of unfavorable family conditions, which leads some individuals to persist in their criminal activities past the age threshold of what is considered normal, which is around 21 years of age. Moffat also theorizes that adolescence-limited offenders engage in crime primarily as a show of independence and not necessarily because they actually enjoy committing crime. Moffat gathers the data for his study from the Israeli National Police Contact Registry and the Israeli Ministry of Interior. Since this topic is complex to document and put into numbers, Moffat actually finds a clever way of determining whether family bodes an influence on offending trajectories. He does this by documenting juveniles' arrest records and compares it to data showing their family members' incarceration records. In order to stay true to the study, he only documents juvenile arrest data after the fact of a family member incarceration. Moffat also establishes a risk factor categories, with a parent or sibling being a first-degree risk factor, an aunt or uncle being a second-degree risk factor, and a cousin being a third-degree risk factor. Moffat's study concludes that the imprisonment of a family member directly correlates with higher rates of arrest for juveniles. Of course, a first-degree risk factor correlates with the highest rates of arrest for juveniles, with the remainder of the risk factors following the same order. Moffat hypothesized that a family imprisonment leads to resentment of the justice system by juveniles, and the lack of an adult figure leads them to become more likely to offend. The study also shows that those who cease offending after the age of 20, otherwise known as adolescence-limited offenders, have a far fewer rates of family member incarceration. This is a strong piece of evidence towards his developmental theory of crime, which is why it is heavily mentioned in modern-day research on this topic. The next research study comes from Small et al. And is more focused on how family structure, education, and presence can affect a juvenile's likelihood of substance use. This study is quite beneficial to my research as its results can help establish how much of a role family has on offending. Substance use correlates with offending patterns, so studying and documenting substance use is another clever way of measuring family influence on offending trajectories. The data for this study consists of data from the Monitoring the Future study. This study is federally funded and consists of a questionnaire given to students from the 8th to 12th grade. Questions from this questionnaire include frequency of drug use, attitudes towards certain drugs, family life, and parental education and presence, which are all topics which can really help us understand how much family influence offending trajectories. The study concludes that juveniles with parents who have not completed high school or are more likely to engage in substance use, and the same is true for juveniles who only live with one parent. In contrast, juveniles with both parents present who have either some or a completed college education are the least likely to engage in substance use. This is strong evidence towards how important family presence is for juveniles, as well as family education. This is considering the drastic disparity between substance use for juveniles with one or two parents at home. The conclusions of this study indicate that family presence has a large influence on offending trajectories. The last study comes by way of Bosio and Beaver and is also focused on how family structure impacts offending trajectories. The data comes from the National Longitudinal Study of Adolescent to Adult Health. And the study actually began in 1995, and its uniqueness is symbolized by its length. The study consists of 4 waves, and each wave is defined as a questionnaire given to the original participants. The questions include parental relationship, whether they're divorced or together, impact on individual, and offending record of the individual. Since this study takes place over the course of multiple years, it can follow the participants and document their growth over time. The study concludes that individuals with divorced parents are more likely to offend, but their offending persistence decreases over time. Additionally, parental divorce has less of an effect on an individual the older they become. This means that juveniles are most likely to offend after parental divorce, and adults are least likely to offend. Regardless, this breakdown in family structure does play a large role on an individual's offending trajectory. A good way to apply the findings of this topic to the real world is by showing leniency to juveniles in the court system, as they are most likely to be influenced by familial conditions. Punishing a juvenile through a jail or a prison sentence will only increase their risk of reincarceration, which will put in place a nasty offending cycle. Things such as a drug court can be a great resource to help set individuals back on track without ruining their perception of the justice system. The move to a rehabilitative justice system rather than a punitive one can help individuals struggling with an unfavorable family life not feel the need to offend. Another way this can be applied is through the use of mentors who can serve as an adult or parental guidance to those who most need it. Mentors can come in the form of a teacher, coach, or a therapist, and they can help individuals safely express themselves and not resort to crime as a method of gaining attention. Putting an emphasis on how influential mentors can help decrease juvenile offending rates, as well as offer them the guidance they may lack at home. In conclusion, research on family influences on offending trajectories all heavily indicate how crucial of a role one's family has in influencing offending behavior. Factors such as family structure, education, and presence all play a major role in the healthy development of an individual. This impact should be more heavily emphasized, and this knowledge can help decrease the consistent increase in arrest rates year after year. Please leave any comments or questions you have down below. I truly hope you've learned something from all of this, and thank you for sticking through my entire presentation. On my next page are my references if you'd like to check out the studies that I gathered my data from.